Okay, here we are today, and everything's calmer today. I got a little more of a head start, and now we are rolling. Let's see if the link works. Do we have any sound? Doesn't seem to have any sound. Say something. Good morning, world. Let's try refreshing it, and we'll go over and paste it anyway. There we go. Control V. Okay, that's good. Now, why isn't the link isn't working either? Well, we got our usual. Here I am. Everything's set. I can't edit the dumb thing on LinkedIn, and everything quits working. It's pretty amazing. And LinkedIn keeps sending me 7 messages that's in the way of my post. Well, let's just post. I can't even post. It's great. What about over here? This thing is still spinning. It's like I lost the internet all of a sudden. Don't know. Can't verify that it's working. So let's just shoot it and see what happens. Unbelievable. I mean, really? Yeah, really. Here I am all set. Okay, we have a grocery store that really was committed to recycling their bags. They wanted people to remember to bring their cloth bags, I guess. And so they thought, well, how can we raise the awareness? So they made these weird bags. They made up names of establishments and thought that they would get people to think about and remember not to take them out because they don't want to be seen with them. So this is Into the Weird Adult Video Emporium, like you're trying to hide your adult video. And they had a whole bunch of them. They were trying Public Shame, Wart Ointment Wholesale, and the Colon Care Co-op. Now that one I really liked. Because the idea of doing that as a co-op is really gross. But anyway, the idea backfired. And the scheme backfired. People began flocking to the market, paying the 5 cents each in hopes of collecting the designs. That's the funny part. Now, again, try something. I'm a firm believer in testing and trying things. And so what happened was the bags were meant to force consumers to think twice about the plastic consumption, with the smaller tagline, avoid the shame, bring a reusable bag. They got a lot of attention. They probably got a lot of customers. They probably got a lot of people buying groceries. And so now they're going to print up the messages on canvas tote bags. Oh, that's even weirder. And then there's a big story about how we throw away plastic. We should be burning plastic. It's got lots of energy in it, makes great electricity, and very low emissions when you burn it properly. So it's much less energy. It's much less environmentally impactful to burn it than to truck it around in different places trying to get it made back into something. I can tell you that for real. Minneapolis, which is one of the greeny places on earth, studied it and kept their incinerator downtown. I'm just telling you. You learn it here first, folks. You won't hear all this news. Okay, GDPR. British Airways shows how data protection legislation is going to bite. The UK's ICO, that's what I've been talking about for about 3 years now. The ICO decided to fine British Airways 183.4 million. That's 228 million US dollars. And they stole the credit cards for 500,000 customers. Now, British Airways argues that no one's actually been damaged. There's no evidence of fraudulent activity on the accounts. And I say, give it time. I started getting a couple these weird blackmail letters saying, "Give me money on Bitcoin, and I won't release this to your friends." Fortunately for me, it was something I don't do, and didn't couldn't figure out how, even if they could get my camera to work, how they could, any easier than photoshopping it, get me and what I'm looking at on the same screen. Mostly I just sit there with a blank stare. Anyway, so I ignored it, but it was from LinkedIn who had a breach. And it was a password that was peculiar to LinkedIn, and so I knew it was that, and it came like 4 or 5 years later, when the data got into the dark web and people could buy it for pennies on the dollar or whatever. So anyway, this is 4 times the largest. This is 4 times the largest penalty ever, but it's only half of what it could have been. Could have been $500 million. So on that note, let's go on over here to California. California, as I told you a couple of months ago, the Senate Judiciary is about ready to open up the voting on some amendments. The most important of which is that material is not reasonably linked to a particular customer. They had it that just linkable, and it was too vague. You can link anything to anybody. It might not be linked right, but we're going through some of that right now. It's very difficult to link data up because there is no common key with a customer. There's an address which can be typed in a number of different ways. There's an IP address which can include everybody at your company if you've used an IP address for ordering, and all sorts of lovely difficulties when you start to actually get into it. But there's another one that is about encrypted data and how you can isolate the difference between the customer, general information about the customer in groups and individual customers. And I think that's probably good. But already people are saying that takes all the teeth out of the California law, which may be true also. Okay, so now this is what I really wanted to talk about. The golden rule is the only rule that matters in the advertising business. Now, I'm not entirely sure that's true. Because, Kevin, we want to do stuff that makes some money. Like the bag thing. There's nothing wrong with a bag thing, and it turns out it made money, accidentally, of course. But effectiveness is another rule in the advertising business, I hate to say. But this is a good rule. It is a good rule. And I've worked for some companies that I didn't agree with the way they did their business and how they acquired customers by telling them fairy tales, in my opinion, since I was the guy behind the desk figuring out the projections, and then they would come out telling them. It was funny because I worked with Gray Direct, which is a big ad agency in New York City. And they hired me to do the projections for IBM, an IBM pitch they were doing. And so I went out there and I said, well, which would you like? Would you like the numbers I think are real, or would you like the numbers you need to get the account? Because I understood the difference. And they said, well, give us both. We'd like to hear what you think. Okay, so I did up this big, nice spreadsheets and stuff, and it was really beautiful. And then I said, I charged them the New York City rate. And so then I ran into the guy who hired me about 1.5 years later, and I said, well, what happened? And he said, well, you were right and you were right. He said, we got the account with the phony number, and the results came in where you thought they would. So now we don't have the account anymore. We figured, well, if we get the account, maybe we can do better than John thinks, and we can keep it. And also, there were some mitigating circumstances with IBM. And I was in the room with IBM when they were thinking of launching it. And they said, well, how many companies are there in the United States? And I said, well, above 5 employees, maybe above 5 employees or something, maybe 14 million, but above 10, probably just 9 or 10 million. They said, how much is a good-looking catalog if we want to do a catalog? And I said, oh, about $1 a piece. You can do a really fancy one for $1 a piece. And they said, well, you mean for a lousy $10 million we can contact everybody? And I tried to explain things like test and roll out and, scale up and all that. They said, no, that's not our job. We're the marketers. All we have to do is get the orders. Operations promises they'll be able to take the calls. And guess what happened? What happened was they mailed 10 million on one day at one time, and the phones were locked up so hard almost nobody could get through. And they were out of stock in everything after the first week. It took them 2 years to recover their credibility. So it wasn't really the ad agency's fault, but they should have insisted, as I told them, on test and rollout. So anyway, the golden rule is central to, everybody's civilization and every religion practically. Treat others as you yourself would wish to be treated. And that's kind of Jesus' version. Most of them are more like, don't do to others what you don't want done to you, which is similar but not identical. Okay? This one's more positive, affirmative, initiative. And as a student of world religions, I can tell you that's a more interesting, elevated perspective. But if you start with the golden rule in every interaction, with your suppliers and your employees, and you do the best on every job, that's pretty good. And I like that. I like that approach, and I've been doing that approach. And so I wanted to share with you my very first privacy statement. And I wrote this back in 1995 for whitetail.com. We were getting registrations, and a lot of websites back then were saying, we will not share your data with anybody ever. Well, I'm a guy that takes people's data and makes sense of it. So I didn't really want to say that. I didn't want other people to say that. I wanted people to understand that there's an appropriate use of data, which is within the GDPR and the CCPA, and there are inappropriate uses. So here's my golden rule privacy statement. We will only send you stuff we would like to get ourselves, including email and mailings and stuff. Your registration lets us know that you'd like to hear from us. We had a contest going, and we got thousands and thousands of registrations. And just let us know if you don't want to get any more info, but don't expect to win the bow either. And that's actually part of a provision in the CCPA where you can't treat customers differently even if they don't give you permission to use their data. And I think that's dumb. People should be incentivized slightly, rewarded for giving you data. So that's enough for today. Like and share. Share shows you care. Have a great day. I'm John Miglash.